white flashes going off all over the sky.
This is Bernard Shaw crawling around with his microphone out the window and then allergy.
As the anti-aircraft weapons continue to fire, there's a huge, loud burst from the ground. More sections going up into the air over the city, and there's a lot of fire going up. And as I say, these bombs continue to come down occasionally on the ground here. There's no sign that any of the aircraft that are involved in this, not from Iraq but from the Allied forces, have suffered any damage.
So, know how young...
Pentagon officials say it should have come as no surprise that this attack started tonight. They say that the United States wanted to start the attack at night. There are specific targets for almost 5.5 months. The United States has outlined virtually every strategic target in Iraq and occupied Kuwait.
I show that just for those of us that remember it at the time that was in the news, and I couldn't believe how young Wolf Blitzer looks. I'm thinking, yeah, that must have... we must have all aged, I guess, a little bit. So, I want to thank Paul for that intro too. Way over the edge. But thank you, I appreciate that. Very, very thoughtful. So, I'm going to talk for you a couple minutes about the 117 operations in Desert Storm. The rules of engagement are that this is a give and take. If anybody has any questions, let me know. While we're running through the briefing, if I say something you don't understand, let me know. And we'll stop and we'll answer them at the time. Very informal, but I think you should get a feel for what it was like about that time frame flying the airplane. So we'll get a quick introduction. We'll talk about the black jet itself for a few minutes. We'll talk about some of the weapons, the systems, the delivery modes that the airplane used. We'll talk a little bit about the build-up to Desert Shield and then eventually the transition to Desert Storm. I have a couple personal notes I'll bring forward, and we'll talk about some of the lessons learned. For those of you that have never seen one, this is a hardened aircraft shelter after. So we'll look at some hardened aircraft shelters before. So important, what this brief is and what it's not. This is not the big picture. This is one man's perspective on how the war was. I am not this guy, T.R. Milton, Air Force historian. I'm not Barrett Tillman, another outstanding historian. Don Miller in the lower left-hand corner is the 8th Air Force historian, writes great stuff. And this is not a synopsis of the Gulf War Air Power Survey. This is one guy's perspective of what it was like from my cockpit in the 117. And there's a problem with that. So there's a problem with one man's perspective, right? Everybody's heard the parable of the 4 blind men, right, and the elephant, all trying to describe the element from their perspective. You can see that each one has a different perspective. The danger is you don't want to be this guy, right? So the danger is that you're the 5th guy. My concern is that my perspective isn't the soft and mushy, okay? So you're going to hear one guy's perspective on it. It's not the official word, but I'll try and stay as close to actual events as I can. So this is me, a little bit of rundown. A 1980 graduate of Rocky Mountain Trade School. I spent 21 years in the Air Force, flying 2 versions of the F-4, the A-7, the 117, and the F-15C. When the war started in January of 1991, I was a flight commander, I was an IP in the airplane, I was a mission commander in the 117. At that point in time, I had about 1,600 hours of fighter time, of which 400 hours were in the 117. I had about 3 years flying the airplane, and I was 32 years old. I put this up there so that you kind of get a feel and some perspective of what I was like on the opening night of the war. I'd been flying the airplane for a long time. I've been flying fighters for a long time. I had the luxury of knowing the aircraft and the systems. I was an instructor in the airplane. I've been teaching other people. So no excuses. If I had done anything wrong, I couldn't have an excuse. This wasn't me new to the airplane. This wasn't me new to the Air Force. I've been flying fighters for a long time. A couple pictures of me with hair. My lovely bride there in the center flying when I was in Eagle. So that was me on the opening night of the war. Now to give us a little perspective, let's look at something else. Anybody know who this guy is?
Harry Thing.
Harry Thing. Born in Laconia, raised in Barnstead, lived in Pittsfield. Okay, so what was he like? Let's see. He was a 1939 ROTC graduate right up the street at UNH. In his 26-year career, just 5 years longer than mine, take a look at the number of aircraft he flew. His first aerial combat at age 24. By age 25, he was promoted to lieutenant colonel, was already an ace, and had been shot down twice. Okay? He was a group commander at age 26, and by 33, that's about the same age I was when I flew my first combat story. The guy already had his 5th MiG kill in his 2nd war. Okay? So for perspective, I had a lot of time and a lot of luxury. I was a pretty mature guy by the time I heard shots fired for the first time. It wasn't always that way. Guys who went to war before us did it in a very different picture. And I want to point out one other thing. If you take a look at his medals, look up here, you'll notice that he has 2 air medals, right? That's because he has so many oak leaf clusters, both silver and bronze, that they had to put a 2nd award in the medal. He had so many awards in the air medal, okay? Pretty studly guy. But compare that to me. This guy had his first combat when he was age 24, right? So, very different picture than when I was flying. Okay, so the Black Jet itself. Kind of an interesting platform. You've seen a lot of stuff on it. It's a low observable night precision strike airplane. It was built specifically for one mission and one mission alone, and that is night precision strike against strategic targets. Okay. Single seat, twin engine airplane. Probably the best motors I've flown behind in my entire Air Force career. The GEF 404 F1D2. Never stalled, never had a problem, just a terrific motor. Non-afterburning, because that puts a big signature out there, and the whole idea of the airplane is to be relatively low signature. The exhaust, in fact, vented through 2 flat pieces here that were called platypuses that actually sloped up away from the ground so that you were not visible to IR signature on the ground, and it spread the exhaust over the same kind of ceramic tile that they use on the bottom of the shuttle to dissipate the heat. So it's a pretty interesting design itself. The engines were actually buried inside the aircraft and took their air through gridded intakes on the front of the airplane. We'll see a bunch of pictures of that as we roll along. I just ask you to look for it when you see the picture. The idea is that turbine blades on the front of a jet engine are big radar signatures, so I want to bury those engines deep in the system. All airplanes, most airplanes, almost all airplanes are built around something. The F-15 is built around a giant radar. The A-10 is built around a giant gun in front of it. The 117 was built around 2 2,000-pound class bomb bays. The whole idea was I wanted to be able to carry 2 2,000-pound class weapons internally so that there was no signature from the airplane. As you can see, it's not exactly a very aerodynamic looking airplane. It is aerodynamically unstable, and it required a fly-by-wire flight control system to keep the airplane flying. Lose the computers, lose the airplane. There was a air show back in the late 90s in Silver Springs, Maryland, where some of you might have seen it. 117 went down, lost a piece of one of the ailerons, and once that flight control system was compromised, that's it, the airplane went out of control and crashed. So in order to make sure that that didn't happen, which kind of didn't want to happen, the system was quad redundant, so you had 4 flight control computers. It was actually quad redundant, and then, if you lost power, there was still a set of batteries to power that, so it was kind of important, so they put a lot of redundancy in it. Limited to high subsonic speeds, both by structure and signature. What that meant was that you weren't supposed to go supersonic. We had a calibrated airspeed limit. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but I'll tell you this. I've been past the calibrated airspeed limit. Everybody I know has been past the calibrated airspeed limit. The airplane will go past this calibrated airspeed limit. And on the opening night of the war, if you weren't flying past the calibrated airspeed limit, you're wrong, right? Structure was that the tails, the word was that both the tails and the pitot booms, as you came back subsonic, would possibly structurally fail due to the shockwave movement. I don't know, never heard of that happening, but you also don't want a supersonic signature, so you ran as fast as you could and stayed within the system. In fact, it used to yell at you if you got within 5 knots of the structural limit of the airplane. It used to just go airspeed, 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 airspeed. You couldn't silence it, it would never be quiet. So first night of the war, everybody's looking at their videotapes and everybody's got an airspeed alert in the background going off. Roughly F-15 size, if you look at the size of the airplane, even though there's a little bit more surface area to it, it's about the size of an F-15. We park in F-15 size hangars. We made facilities for the airplane about F-15 size, which is kind of nice. The airplane reached its IOC, had its first ORI in '83. I got the airplane 4 years later in '87. And when we went to war, we were the 37th Tactical Fighter Wing. We consisted of 3 squadrons, the 415th Night Stalkers, the 416th Ghost Riders, my squadron, and the 417th, which was the replacement training squadron, the RTU. They actually came over and joined us. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So, nice picture here before we start going. You can see the gridded intakes on the front of the airplane. You can see that these are blow-in auxiliary air doors on the top. You can't get a whole lot of air through a gridded intake. It actually looks just like an ice cube tray, if you look at an ice cube tray. So when you're flying slow, you can't get enough air through there, so These doors open up on the top to let additional air in, great big old doors on the top. Slam shut automatically around 250 knots, which is incidentally around when the gear comes up. So as you put the gear up on takeoff, an extremely vulnerable time and a night takeoff, all of a sudden, kabam, kabam, the two doors would slam shut. More than one person's attention was somewhat diverted when you're flying in a very vulnerable position at takeoff, starting to climb out, and all of a sudden, kabang, kabang, you hear two big thumps that you first think are the engines failing, but they're just the silly doors closing. This, by the way, is a peacetime jet. I can tell you that because there's a light there. All the lights on the outside of the airplane were scabbed off when we went to war and covered up with radar absorbent material. Okay, so the primary system on the airplane was called IRADS, the Infrared Acquisition and Target Designating System. It consisted of an upper and lower turret on the airplane. The upper turret's right here, behind a grid again to keep radar signature low, and the lower turret sits right here underneath the airplane. And what would happen is I would pick up a target, and the system would seamlessly track it in the top turret, and then when it came time to hand off, it would hand off seamlessly, usually, to the bottom turret, and then would track it underneath the bottom of the airplane. That was pretty much straightforward and transparent to the pilot. You could see it when it transitioned, but you really didn't have to do anything. And that allowed you to passively acquire the target based on its infrared signature, and I could laze it to designate weapons against it. Precision inertial nav system, remember this is 1991, no GPS, no ring laser gyro. This was a spinning mass INS that took 45 minutes to fully align. So you run out to the airplane, 45 minutes for a full alignment, and the INS was pretty important because it not only took you where you wanted to go, but it also pointed the IRAD system towards where it thought was the target. So it was an important part of the targeting and the navigation system. So you didn't just run out and grab the airplane on a 9-minute quick align. It would point the IRAD to the target coordinates, and then you would refine it as a pilot. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward, but it was an important part of the system for nav and targeting. And then, of course, we dropped laser-guided free-fall ordnance. These are GBU-27s underneath. You can see that this is the door of a weapons bay. These are done on trapezes. The weapons bays sit right here underneath the airplane. Open up the doors. Leading edge, they're always sawtoothed on any kind of airplane like this to reduce radar signature. You see all the sawtooths around here. That's a part of the radar signature. And then the 2,000-pound bombs were carried one on each side. We could carry both 500-pound, we could carry actually a variety of ordnance, but as far as the Gulf War went, we only dropped 2,000-pound ordnance in 2 flavors. The GB-10 Paveway 2 was a 2,000-pound blast frag munition crowd pleaser. This is something when you wanted a lot of blast and frag. It was an earlier bomb was what's called bang-bang steering, which meant that the fins only deflected fully left or fully right. So as it was tracking the target, if it saw itself going off to the side, it fully deflected the fins to move itself back over, and as soon as it went by its center, fully deflected the fins left and right. So you can imagine this bomb was going this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, bleeding off a lot of energy as it went down. In fact, talking to guys that had been on the ground, you can actually hear the fins banging back and forth as the bomb falls away. We also carried the GB-27 Paveway 3, which was a 2,000-pound hardened penetrator. We're going to see it in a second, but this is one I wanted to bore precision holes. This didn't have as much blast, but it dug very deep holes. There were a couple of examples during the Gulf War when we dug through 9 meters, 27 feet of reinforced concrete. That's with rebars and drilled nice holes through. It also had dual flight modes. I could drop this. I could program it from the airplane. I could drop it, and it would drop like a normal bomb, or I could drop it in what's called horizontal mode, where once the bomb came free of the airplane, it pitched over to almost 90 degrees and fell straight down, which gave it terrific penetration capability, just a super system. And it was proportional navigation. It had a little autopilot, and it said, well, if I need to turn left a little bit, I'll turn left a little bit, or I'll turn right a little bit, instead of going full deflection one way or the other. That means that at endgame, I had a lot more energy to make last-minute turns and those kinds of things. It was a much more accurate weapon system, as we'll see in just a second. Here's the two.
Scott,
sorry.
Quick question. Were you guys exclusively qualified for carrying laser-guided weapons, or did you have any free-fall stuff?
We dropped some free-fall stuff, too. We could drop free-fall out of the airplane. We just didn't do a whole lot of it because you really wanted the precision that a laser-guided bomb would give you. We dropped some free-fall stuff in training. We dropped a couple of other. That's for me on the. we dropped a couple of other free-fall munitions in training and stuff, but we didn't use any of it during the Gulf War because you wanted precision, you needed the precision.
Did you self-designate only, or did you
Yep.
pick your buddy lays?
We self-designated almost exclusively. I don't know anybody that buddy lays. Buddy lays was a problem because of the way the system was automated, but we always self-designated. So here are the two weapons that we're talking about. You can see the Mark 84, the GBU-10 up here in the top. You can see how much bigger this bulb is. This is a blast frag warhead. The bomb itself weighs 1,900 pounds, of which almost 1,000 is trite. A lot of explosive, a lot of energy there. CEP means, circular or probable, means that 50% of the bombs are going to hit within a circle that's 27 feet across. So in other words, I can hit reliably within about 27 feet of where I'm going to drop this bomb. And if you think about this room, that means that I might hit in the far corner of this room, but 27 feet I'm going to hit this room.
From what height?
From wherever we dropped it. That's across all altitudes and drop speeds for the 6 months prior to the Gulf War. So I could hit this room within 27 feet of this room from 10,000, 15,000, realistically from 20,000 if I wanted to. Great weapon if what you needed to do was blast something and a lot of blast and overpressure. GB-27 was, it's going to sound silly, but my favorite, for a couple reasons. First off, you'll notice that it's a 1,900-pound class weapon, but there's only 500 pounds of trike on it. The rest of it is a cold-rolled steel hardened body. And you can see that this is a penetrating type body. It's smaller, it's like a big old drill bit, it's hardened steel, and this would drill down deeply. The 14 inches in diameter versus 18 inches, so it's a little bit narrower, and this is the big paveway 3 had in it that gave it its speed. And then this is the thing I like down here. For the 6 months prior to the start of the Gulf War, we had a 0 CEP on this bomb, which meant that every single bomb we hit within a meter of where we dropped it, every one. Which means that I could hit the front of this room instead of the back 2 rows. Easy peasy, right? Great weapon system, far more tolerant than it should have been. I don't have film of it, unfortunately. We're going to see some film later, but they're a great film of guys dragging lasers across an airfield trying to hit a target at the last minute that should never have been able to do it. This bomb comes winging around the corner and makes the hit. So, great system, really good. So here's how targeting worked in 117. So Intel Support comes down and says, okay, here's a target. We got higher headquarters tasking. We want this building right here. This is the headquarters of the Bath Party. This is the Air Force headquarters. This is some kind of thing that we want. A photo package prepared for the pilot consists of 3 pictures. We're going to actually get to see this a little bit later. I think you'll kind of like it. You'll typically have a high, a medium, and a low pack in your hand. They'll say, here's the target pack for you for this particular target for tonight. We have 2 of those for 2 targets on a typical combat mission. This is Baghdad, by the way, in case anybody recognizes it. So you get a high altitude one that allows me to see significant features. You get a medium one that helps me refine my target. And then you get a blow up of the actual target yourself. And for this particular one, it's not that building. It's actually the little bitty thing that's right behind it. Okay? And that was typically what we would train against for targets. We'll talk a little bit about training here in a second and what we actually did. But at the risk of sounding facetious, the targets that we dropped on during the Gulf War significantly easier to hit than anything we trained against. So on a target, so if you look at this picture down, oops, it's not what I wanted to do. There we go. If you look at this picture down in the lower right-hand corner right here, see that nice big building right there? Never would have got that as a training target in training. Never would have got that. It would have been judged way too easy. So you'd have gotten little bitty targets like this, or a little bitty target like that, or a little bitty target like that in training. And in the Gulf War, we ended up with much bigger targets. You can get to see some of them in a few minutes when you see some video. So the INS we talked about before, we type in the coordinates of the target in the INS. As we fly the target, the INS also tries to go, okay, here's the target. It tries to put a cursor over the top of it. It does a fairly good job, but then you have to refine it yourself. You have a moving cursor underneath your, in the 117 it was under this finger. You moved it under that finger, and you designated the laser by yourself. So you drug the cursor over what you really knew the target to be, no matter what the system thought it to be. So, delivery profile. You do some pre-mission study of the target. So So we'd get ready for target, they'd hand me 2 target packs, I'd sit there and look at it, and I'd go through the target pack and I'd look for things. Okay, what's going to show, what's not going to show? Am I going to be able to see this airfield? Am I going to be able to see these runways? Am I going to be able to work my way back in? Everybody here, probably everybody here, the large majority have flown with maps before, so you know that when I look at a map, I typically go big to small. If I'm navigating cross country with my VFR map, I say, okay, am I going to be able to see the big lake? And then am I going to be able to see the big road come out of the big lake? And then just where the road comes out of the big lake, that's where my airfield is. I navigate like that. I do the same thing looking at a photo pack. This is a picture of the cockpit. You can see there's the IRAD display, the IR display in the cockpit. There's his photo pack map right there. It's just sit on my right knee. So I'd have photos with me. That's a Form 70. That's the mission profile or the routing. And the throttles are here where I'm steering the thing. But I'd be looking at this photo pack and looking at the IRAD, looking to match up what I'm seeing on the picture with what I'm seeing in the IR. And I'm also worried about running headings and deconfliction because we ran over a single target. Although we never operated as cooperative 2 ships, we operated as singles in very close timing a number of times. You get to see a little bit of that in a few minutes.
Scott,
Sir?
you said your left hand. I can't see a center yoke. There is no yoke?
No, that's a stick there. It's just, it's tough to see in this picture, but the stick's right there.
Oh, okay. So you still...
So you're still flying. You have a there was an attitude hold button you could do that would help you. Those of you guys who have flown autopilots know I can hold basically my pitch. It would auto trim the pitch for me, and then I could also reference a system that would hold the altitude for me, so I could kind of take my hand off every once in a while.
So you're still doing like we see in the movies. You've got your left hand on the stick or something.
So you got your right hand on the stick.
Right.
So you get right hand on the stick, or at least you're guarding the stick as you're okay. I'm trying to do this. Hold your. So you're trying to get the system referenced on the autopilot. Okay, hold that.
And like a speed ball, you might say, on the computer.
Yeah,
on your left
right.
hand.
It's much like a mouse on a
Wow.
computer, or like a ball, track ball underneath your left hand. So we fly a pre-planned attack heading to the target. So the mission planning cells would have all the threats in the area updated constantly, and they put them on a big overlay, and then we have mission planning software that would say, okay, based on these threats and our signature, we want you to come in this way, this way, this way, and come into the target on a specific run. Those of you that are familiar with LO airplanes and stealth really isn't a new concept. You're not stealthy all the time, you're not stealthy to everything, you're not stealthy from every angle, right? So what I want to do is put my stealthiest features towards the biggest threat. So I have a mission planning program that says, okay, fly here, then fly here, then fly here, and that'll take care of this threat, that'll take care of that threat. Right? And the idea is not that I'm going to be invisible the whole time, but by the time somebody sees me, it'll be too late to react. Right? So stealth has been around for a long time. If you think about it, stealth is no different than the first guy who pulled on a buffalo skin and got close to the herd. By the time the buffalo said, hey, that's not Randy, it was too late. And he's dead. Right? So the whole idea is by the time they realize I'm there, it's too late for them to do anything about it. So, all right. So the pilot compares the photos to the display, looks at it, and says, "Okay, here's what I got. That's what I got. Yep, that's the one." And we're all going to do that. Okay, that's the one. All right, good. And I get to jump on the pickle button. When we get inside the basket, release basket for the airplane, the doors open. Kaboom! The bomb comes whooping out. The doors close. It takes about, well, based on the new system, it takes about 4 seconds for the doors to open and close. You can see the doors here open. The signature on the airplane spikes. No big surprise. It's not a secret. You can figure that one out yourself, so you don't like the doors to be open any longer than you have to. When I first started flying the airplane, it actually took significantly longer because we lowered the bomb into the slipstream and then dropped it. It's called trap down. Horrible. But we sped that up with some different software changes. So doors open, doors close. Then you identify, put the target in the IRAD, shoot the laser at it, track the bomb through the impact, boom. And that's just what we talked about there. So weapon goes into a basket. Sir?
I'm sorry. You push the button, drop the bombs. You're still flying at some miles per hour. You're long past the target.
That's right. So remember that I said I have both a flare and a delire, right? I have a forward-looking infrared and I have a downward-looking infrared that actually tracks back underneath the bottom of the airplane. right? So I can be pulling off, or I can be flying past, or I can be doing a bunch of different things, and that turret on the bottom actually allows me to look back behind the airplane.
So you've got to focus visually on a screen while you're getting out of town, so to speak.
Yeah. So you keep tracking it as you're doing this, but depending on the altitude you're on, the time of flight's not that long, and we'll see some time of flights here as we go.
And all during this time, the triple act, or triple A, whatever you call it, everybody's shooting at you.
Not everybody, but damn near. But it seemed like everybody.
But you can see that in front of your windshield.
Sure, actually over the top of it too. And the one thing I learned on the first night of the war is you can actually hear AAA. I didn't know that. Didn't occur to me. You know, you don't hear anything. It's like a car, right? And just like in a car, if you hear another car from your car, that's not good, right? That means you're too close. Airplanes, if you hear something from an airplane, that's never good.
But doesn't that give you tremendous pause, you know, to see all that crap lighted around, illuminated around you, and
You're pretty focused on what you're doing. The surprising part of it was that you heard it. If AAA goes off close enough to your airplane, you can hear it. You can hear the bang. Didn't occur to me. You never hear anything in an airplane, right? You're kind of isolated. All of a sudden, bang, bang, bang. Holy crap. So, it was a surprise. But you're pretty mission focused. You're pretty concentrated on what you're doing. You're pretty tunneled in on what you're doing for those few seconds. From IP to target from IP to target to off target egress, 2 minutes, minute and a half, something like that. So.
But obviously your stealth worked. Did you ever suffer any battle damage? Or
No.
Nobody came close enough to...
No, we never had any battle damage on the airplane, which was partially tech and partially luck. To be honest with you, if I run across the front of somebody's yard and they turn on their sprinkler, it doesn't matter if I'm invisible or not. There's a good chance I might get wet. So as I'm flying down somebody's airfield and everybody and their mother shooting up in the air, there's a good chance you'll actually get some of that on you, but we fortunately did. So. Sure.
What type of AAA did they use?
Everything from some guy shooting his 8K up in the air through 57 and 100 millimeter AAA. So their biggest guns were 100 millimeter AAA. We saw a lot of 57, saw a lot of 37, saw a lot of 23.
But no surface-to-air missiles?
Oh, lots.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So, in fact, the first time I saw a surface-to-air missile launch over Baghdad, the first night of the war, I'm kind of going, wow. It took me a second to go, oh, I know what that is. So, there were lots of AAA shooting, right? And one of the surprising things about Baghdad, the opening night of the war, was one, everybody had their lights on. You know, like this was none of this World War II blackout curtains, no cigarette smoking, right? The whole place was like flying over Boston or flying over Vegas. And so that was number one surprise. Number two surprise was that every building, so imagine going out into Boston or New York or any big city, and every building having a AAA gun on the roof. So on the top of the Peru, there's a AAA gun. On the top of the Fleet Center, there's a AAA gun. You know, kind of an odd thing, but so everybody and their mother was shooting up in the air the first night, and so there's all this stuff coming up, and you kind of look at it and you go, is there a line through here that actually doesn't have lines intersecting? And then I looked up to the right-hand side. I see a big flash, and I see a great big flash on the ground. And I see something start to come up that looks like kind of AAA, because there's lots of other AAA, except it's bigger. I go, oh, that's a big AAA, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, I know what that is. And it was a SAM launch. It wasn't on me. I don't think it was on anybody. It's probably ballistic, but you know, yeah, they shot out almost whatever they had. So that's the platform. That's the airplane. That's how we employed it. That's how we used it. That's how we trained. We flew Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night every week. Because the airplanes were located uprange, we had to fly up to the airplanes because of the security around the airplanes. So we flew up to the desert, little desert airfield. We flew Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday, Thursday night. Every Monday night we tanked. So we went to the tank every Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night. We came home on Friday. Did it all again the next week. Stayed on a night schedule the entire time. And then October of '90 rolled around. So everybody remembers that on August 2nd, Kuwait was invaded. Hussein claimed the 19th province of Iraq and invaded. Less than 2 weeks later, we get TJ-013 order to execute that says deploy one jet, or one squadron of 22 jets to Southwest Asia, location yet to be determined at the time. But unfortunately, we ran into problems. For those of you that are not familiar, TFFDL stands for Time Phase Force Deployment List. And what TFFDL is every war plan has an entire list of how everybody's going to get to war. What tankers you're going to use, what aircraft are going to haul your stuff, what number in the stream. Imagine a giant supply train that's going from the States to wherever the theater is, and they're going to tell you what boxcar you're going to be in. Right? That's what a TFFDL is. Well, unfortunately, we were secret up until just a little prior to the start of the Gulf War. So that train didn't have a boxcar with our name on it. Right? So they're kind of going, oh, we want you, but where are we going to put you? Well, if I put you in this boxcar, I can't take the 130s. If I put you in this boxcar, I can't take the F-16s. So what are we going to do? So they said, okay, we're leaving tomorrow. No, you're not. So we went to this thing we call 24-hour slip flag. So on Tuesday they said we're leaving, and then they said, nah, slip 24 hours. And then Wednesday they said, nah, slip 24 hours. And so it just kept going. And meanwhile, 3 days later, the wing gets a new wing commander.
Is that why?
No. This was all transitioning across at the same time. A guy named Tony Tolan was giving up the wing. A guy named Elton C. Whitley was coming back to take over the wing. This was all progged out, and then Hussein kind of got in the way. But none of that could be changed, so Whitley took over the wing on the 16th of August. At the point in time, he had been a former Bandit before, which meant he'd flown the airplane before, but he'd been gone for a long time. He was only basic qualified in the airplane, which means he could land and refuel. That's all he could do. He could drop. Wasn't qualified to do anything else. But he took over, and he was on 16th. And 10 days later, he deployed. And the 415th deployed on the 26th of August. This is the 415th lined up on the ramp at Langley. Colonel Whitley flew the first bird in there. These are all their airplanes. They staged out of Langley and then flew to Saudi Arabia from there. About 14.2 hours Langley to Khamis Mashat in southern Saudi Arabia. Long flight. My squadron went about 2 months later in November of 90. What doesn't show in here, I should have put it on the slide, is that 6 October 1990, I get married. I didn't tell anybody about it because...
What did you get?
I got married. I got a wife.
You didn't tell anybody because it was your scout pack.
We didn't tell anybody because we were supposed to get married later. I was supposed to get married in December of 90, and we thought, well, there's just no chance I'm going to be around in December of 90. So we got married. Fortunately, I was living in Vegas at the time, and there are very few things you can do in life that are easier to get married in Vegas. Right? harder to register your car. So we got married, didn't tell anybody about it. Didn't tell our friends, didn't tell my wife's parents, didn't tell anybody about it.
How many times do you have to hit the tanker on the way over, Scott?
I'm going to get there in a second. So,
Where's your honeymoon going to be?
anyway, so in the mobility processing line, I lean over to my squadron commander as we're filling out these emergency locator cards. I go, by the way, I'm married. He goes, really? Cool, I'll tell my wife. And for those of you that were in the Air Force, one of the reasons I got married was because the Air Force treats your wife very differently than they treat your girlfriend, right? So your girlfriend, your fiancée, they don't care who you are. They don't talk to you. It doesn't matter. Your wife is suddenly a member of the club. So we took off out of, to go to Steve's question, so we took off out of Langley, and we took off at night, and it was a 14.5-hour flight. And we refueled probably, I have it in a logbook somewhere, I think we refueled about 16 times. So that sounds like an awful lot, but remember.
How many times?
About 16, I think. But some of them were relatively small. So here's the way it works when I deploy. I always want to have enough gas in my airplane so that if the tanker breaks, I can go to someplace and land, right? What I don't want is to be flying along and my buddy Dean breaks the boom off in his airplane, and suddenly the tanker can't give me the gas I need, and I'm like, now I'm jumping out of the water. So whenever we got far enough away from land, we filled back up. We flew a little while, filled back up, so that we were always had enough fuel on board so that if the tanker crapped out, we could go land at lodges or row to Spain or someplace on the African continent as we drove down. So there's more refueling than you think, only because we wanted to keep the airplanes full of gas, right? The idea was keep the airplane full of gas so that you could always land. So as I'm flying along, I'm looking down at my leg, and we're in a 6-ship on the tanker, crappy weather. Of the 14.5 hours, almost 8 hours, or over 8 hours of it were at night. But you say, okay, from here, if something happened, I'm going to Lodges, or from here, I'm going back home to Langley. And you pass certain points, say, okay, if something happens here, I'm going to Lodges in the Azores. If something happens here, I'm going to Rota, Spain. Right? So, fortunately, nothing happened. And we ended up at King Khalid Air Base, Khamis Mashhad, Saudi Arabia, down in the southwest corner of Saudi Arabia. A great base, wonderful base. Now let's think about this for a second. So this is in Saudi Arabia. We actually peeled off some of the plastic on the, right, so this was an unbelievably well-built airfield in Saudi Arabia. I emphasize that again, in Saudi Arabia. We peeled off the plastic in a couple of the hangars. I mean, they were that new. They had not been used before. And you think, wow, this is a great airfield. Super shelters, great runways, great facilities. And you think, wow, I wonder who this is for. The power was 110, when the rest of the power in Saudi Arabia is 220. Okay, there's only one country in the world that uses 110. And the signs on the airbase were in English and in Farsi, or in Arabic. So, gosh, I wonder who they were planning on coming here and using this airfield, right? So my stuff plugged right into the wall, and none of the Saudi stuff plugged into the wall, right? So clearly it was an airbase that had been put there in terms of a contingency operation, or at least part of it. There was a Saudi F-16, Saudi F-15 squadron, and a Saudi Tornado squadron operating on the far side of the base, and we occupied some brand new hangars. So the 415th initial arrival, right? So they fly over, they land, and nobody knows what Hussein's intentions are at this point in time, right? There's every chance that he's going to pivot right, and he's going to go into the Saudi oil fields, and he's going to take the Saudi oil fields. So these guys land, turn their airplanes around, bomb them up, and get ready to go, because they don't know what's going to happen. These guys are sleeping in the hangars. They didn't have any food the first 48 hours. Horrible supply situation, because nobody knew what the Iraqi intentions were. Everybody had to get ready to go. As things stabilized and people were able to bring in more, or in Hussein gives actually more time to build up, it became obvious that there was some time to do some build-up and some training. So we started training over there with a purpose. Started in-theater flight for the pilots. Everybody had the opportunity to fly. We flew on live ranges. We dropped live bombs in Saudi Arabia. We flew what were called bunker missions, which were missions where we flew along the border, where other airplanes were tracking us to see if the Saudis noticed we were up along the border, to see if their radars turned on, to see if the radars were tracking us, to see what was going on. Did they know we were there? Mission planning cell sat down and started strike planning the first few days of the war. They already knew what targets we were going to do, so they started putting photo packs together and started mission planning the first few days of the war. As December rolled around, and it looked like this was going to be a longer standoff, the UN had passed Resolution 678 saying, hey, if you're not out by the 15th of January, bad things are going to happen. So we started stopping flying, or at least decreasing our flying, taking the airplanes and loading them up. So instead of flying 12 sorties a day, we flew 2 sorties a day. We took 10 airplanes and we loaded bombs on them and got them all ready to go in case something happened. There was a risk of an Iraqi preemptive strike. During the Iran-Iraq War, Hussein had attacked Iran preemptively. He had done it on a holiday. There was a major U.S. holiday coming up, Christmas. So there was a chance that he might preemptively strike before everybody was in play. So there was a big chance that he was going to do that, so we had aircraft sitting alert. We had 4 ships of airplanes all loaded up with bombs, sitting alert, getting ready to go. This is a picture of me on Christmas Day, 1990, because my flight was on alert that day, because I thought Hussein was actually going to attack on Christmas Day. I believe intel, and I wanted my flight ready to go on. So I traded with a guy, and I got Christmas Day of 1990. So my flight of 4 was ready to go on that day. And of course, he didn't attack, so I just ruined Christmas for no good reason. Gave me another reason to dislike the guy. So we sat on alert, waiting for the 15th of January to roll around. But the thing I want to emphasize, we had almost 6 months in theater, right? 415th got in theater in August, we got in theater in November. We had tons of time to build up. We got to fly sorties in theater. We got to see what it was like. We got to drop bombs. We got to hone our skills. Everybody was ready to go, finally tuned on the 15th of January, and then when the war actually started a couple days later, we were pretty much ready to go. So,
Scott, excuse
sir,
me, that last picture, that's daylight. Right there, that
Yep.
you showed pictures yourself.
Yep.
And the one above it is daylight.
Yep.
And all, in fact, everything's daylight. Now, how did you get your head around working all night long, if you're flying at night and you're up during the day.
You just kind of slept as much as you could during the day, but to be honest with you, you're so keyed up. You tried to sleep during the day. We slept in the hangars with the airplanes, so you could keep the light out if you wanted to. But to be honest with you, they couldn't really. Well, in fact, you'll see that on the next slide. So we get this. The wing gets the order execute Wolfpack. First COTs are 0300. Everybody wanders out of their rooms into the squadron ops room in the hangar. The wing DO, Klaus Boss, is standing there. He's got a shitty grin on his face, and he goes, "We're a go. It's going to happen at 3 o'clock tonight. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. He goes, go back to your room and get some sleep because it's going to be long." Yeah, right. Everybody's so keyed up. They're like, "Oh my God, it's really going to happen." And we all thought, by the way, everybody thought that he was going to blink. Everybody thought that what was going to happen was sometime prior to the 15th, he was going to go, okay, I'll pull some troops out. And he'd pull one small division of troops out, and everybody in the coalition would go, okay, see, he's complying, and the UN would do the UN thing and go, oh, it's okay, and we'd be there forever. So everybody expected him to take the smart move out and go, okay, I'll blink. So sure enough, we get the Wolfpack come in, and suddenly we're a go.
What does TOT mean?
Time on target. It means our first bombs are going to go off around 0300 local time. Okay,
Thank you.
Pathfinder Ops, we first launched a couple of 117s with a couple of that actually broke through the lines as you crossed the border. There were a couple of problematic radars that sat right on the Iraqi border with Saudi Arabia. So the first 2 missions took out those to open up a lane for everybody else to go rolling through. There were Apaches that were involved in that too as a joint coordinated mission. Downtown targets, we ran 3 waves, 30 aircraft that night, 30 sorties on night 1. The targets were, these are air defense operations sectors, filter centers, command and control. These are all the pieces of the command and control network that allowed him to communicate, allowed him to run his integrated air defense system, and allowed him to actually communicate with his troops in the field.
Were you visible to AWACS while you were over target?
No. I have my own opinion on the usefulness of AWACS, but we were not visible to them. Even when I was squawking, even when I had my IFF on, even when I had my antennas out, I couldn't get AWACS live.
I understand your opinion.
Great bunch of guys, AWACS. So, typical mission profile. Pre-strike fueling after takeoff. We take off out of commencement shot. You hit a tanker. Usually we take off in a 2-ship because it was easier that way. You hit a tanker for pre-strike. You go up, you loiter in pre-strike, refueling track. And then when the time came, you look at your watch and go, time for me to leave now. You'd stealth the airplane up and you drop off the tanker and go. When I say stealth up, I mean you take the steps to make the airplane invisible. You suck your antennas in, make sure your lights are off. You run through a couple of other things to make sure that the airplane was as invisible as it was going to get. Okay. No more squawking, no more talking, and once you suck those antennas in, no more talking to anybody, nobody's talking to you. So, one of the greatest things that I liked at that point in time was that we were calm out. There was nobody that was going to confuse anything. My biggest fear the first night was that you'd get some confusing order. Somebody goes, all bandits north of the line, Denver. You go, what the hell's that mean? But didn't have to worry about that. Once the antennas came in, nobody's talking to me. I knew where I was going to go. I knew I was going to drop on.
Scott, when did you come back? When did you guys drop it? Was there a recovery point on the way out where you were allowed to unstealth, put the antennas back out and everything?
That's a great question. Yeah, I'm going to cover it in just 1 second. So once we hit the border, we'd have a stealth in line. Once you dropped off the tanker, you'd pretty much disappear. Then we'd fly high, low, high profile, which means we'd cruise in the mid-20s, and then you drop down into whatever altitude you needed to drop down to. Surprised them too. So you drop down to whatever altitude you needed to for a release. So you fly high, low, high profile. You cruise in high, drop down, run your IP to target run, climb back up, and you cruise back out in the mid-20s. Target sets were command and control, integrated air defense systems, weapons of mass destruction. We had a lot of chemical bunkers the first few nights. High-value targets like Saddam Hussein. We went headhunting for the first few nights. High-value targets like the Baghdad Air Force headquarters, the Bath Party headquarters, a lot of strategic targets. Bridges, airfield, ammo storage. You hit 2 targets each night. sometimes you go out single ship, okay, Scott, here's your target pack, you're going to go out there and you're going to cross this airfield, you're going to hit this, this target at this point in time, okay, bye. Sometimes there'd be 4 or 5 of us over the airfield at the same time. You had to make sure that you were on your TOT, you were on your altitude, because there were other guys dropping at that point at the same time as you were. So coordinated attacks, I wouldn't see you, I wouldn't be talking to you, but I knew that you had a TOT within 5 seconds of mine, so I better be on my time.
Scott, how many miles roughly from the airfield you were stationed at to the border?
Let me see if I can answer that question in just a second. So we de-stealth after we cross the border. Ron, that's your question. So I'd come back across the border, I'd de-stealth, I'd hit a post-strike tanker, and then I'd refuel coming back home. Post-strike refueling was pretty critical because you burned up an awful lot of gas and you were cruising a long way home. There were tankers that were orbiting south of the border. There were always emergency or goalkeeper tankers if you couldn't find yours. And you'd rendezvous with the tanker and then you'd head back home in your RTB. See if this answers Steve's question. So typical mission duration about 6.5 hours. And if you overlay the map of the U.S., that means every night I took off from New Orleans, I flew to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and turned around and came back home. So gives you a feel for what we're talking about in terms of the distance. He's a great straight man over here, I'm telling you. I like this. All right. Because of technology, we're going to go to a different video here. Hang on one sec. All right, so now everybody's going to be a 117 pilot.
Get started.
Okay. No, I know. All right, everybody's going to be a 117 pilot. This is actual photos. This is actually gun camera film from the Gulf War. These are actual photo packs of that target set right there. So if you would please pass these out, and everybody's going to do just exactly what I did in the cockpit. Pass those back as far as they'll go. There's some extras there. So everybody's going to do exactly what I did in the cockpit. We're all going to match photos to what we see in the video. Okay? I'll give you a second to get those passed out. Everybody's got a photo pack that has 3 pictures in it. You got a big overall, you got a mid-size, and you got a blow-up of the actual target itself with the desired munition point of impact or dip with a dot on it. Everybody got one, or we got some extras? Everybody got one that wants one? There's some extras here. We can use an extra here. Okay. Anybody got any extras? Here's one. Here you go. All right. I got one more up here. I've actually seen this. All right. Anybody else got any extras? Okay, here you go. Pass these around. All right. So everybody look at the first pack. Everybody look at the first picture in the first pack, the overall. Everybody see the basic target area we're looking at? Okay. Everybody see that the cursors are sitting just short of the bridge that's crossing that river? All right. So we're going to hit play here in a second and we're going to roll. So here's the target run. All right, take a look at the pictures. All right, now take a look and see. Everybody see this triangular building right here in your photograph? It's in the mid. Everybody see this triangular building right there? See this guy right here? Okay, everybody sees it. You can look at it. Okay, I'm looking at an IR display. I'm looking at my picture going, okay, the building I want is long of the triangular building and is just to the left of the parking garage. Everybody see the parking garage right here? Okay? All right, well, as we come forward, we'll see a little bit more of the parking garage. By the way, I forgot to add one caveat. When they released the footage, they dumbed it down. So this is a significantly worse picture than what I was looking at in the cockpit. The cockpit picture was crisp, just like a TV picture, but when they released this, they deliberately fuzzed it to hide some of the capabilities of the airplane. And then, of course, this is probably an 8th generation copy, so it's a little bit worse, but I think you can see what you need to see. Okay, here we go. So everybody saw this triangle on your picture, right? All right, so here we go. All right, a couple more features become apparent. You should be on your mid now, and if I'm looking at my mid picture, I should be able to see this building. I should see the parking garage right here. I should be able to see this square building right here. Everybody see that? By the way, the pictures that you have right now are 25 years later. Not much has changed. This is, those are pulled off of Google Earth like yesterday or the day before. All right, a couple other things as we come rolling in. All right, something else I want to tell you. So this what we're looking at is an IR display that uses black is hot and white is cold. So everything you see in this display that's black is hot, everything you see in this display that's white is cold. Does everybody see this building right here with the little keys in the corner of it? And this U-shaped building right here should show up bigger than Dallas on your pack. Okay, everybody see that? The car park is starting to form out now, and as you look at it, as we roll forward, look for this bank that's actually on the top level of the car park. That'll show up very nicely. But you can see I've got the building I'm on, and I'm able to confirm that because I can see this U-shaped building, I can see the keyhole-shaped building here, and I know that I'm on the building just short of it, right? Okay. Now you can see how this key-shaped building is very, very apparent. So is this U-shaped building, both of them nice and cool, air conditioners running in them. You can see the parking garage has got this nice big target here. This nice big bank, I should say. So now I've got the target on here, auto and fire on my laser, and about 3, 2, 1, right about there. Okay? Congratulations, you're all 117 pilots. All right? So this is another picture. This is actually one of the palaces in downtown Baghdad. You don't have this photo pack, you're all done with that. But what I wanted to show you here was, take a look at all the large things that when I'm looking at a photo pack like that, I can use to identify where my target is. Big buildings here, big river here with a bridge that crosses it. So I can kind of, as I'm looking at the display, I can say, okay, well I know my target's down here somewhere. I can see the bend in this. These are things that I study in my pre-target photo study. Okay, I got to be near these big buildings. Plus, I have a system in the airplane called an offset aim point that I can take something that I know is going to show, like this building, and I can tell the system, hey, from here to my target is about a heading of, let's call it 150 for 1,000 yards. So if I see this, the system will go, well, if that's that, then that should be your target, right? So it's called an offset aim point. All right. So we're going to see this palace as it blows up. I'm sorry, as it gets larger. All right. So you can see that he's got he's doing his initial ranging right now. That's auto and fire on his laser. The cursor has not come down finally, so I know the bomb's not out of the airplane yet. Now the bomb is away. I can see that it's falling down. The system falls silently for a while. The laser will come on in the last few seconds time of flight. I can see now it's a nice big palace with a big garden thing in front of it like that. Okay, still in auto. In just a second, all of a sudden fire will come on. Bombs falling, bombs falling. Wow. Maybe it's going to make a liar out of me. There it is. There's fire. The last few seconds time of flight, you see kind of the dome on this building. You'll actually see the bomb come in from the bottom. There it is. Ooh. Okay, boom. Black is hot. All right.
At that point, you're well past the target yourself.
In this particular, based on what I'm seeing there, I can tell that he's past the target. He's looking down. Right. He may have turned off. He may have done a lot of things, but I can tell he's past the target based on what I'm seeing there.
Scott, one more thing. As you're coming in, I'm noticing there's no transition between the nose cone IRAD versus the underbelly IRAD. So is it transitioning between the two, or is this all from one?
Most of these are delires. Most of them are downward looking, just because that's the way the film is cut. Okay, so this is kind of obvious, right? These are bridges, right? Cross Tigris River. You see that this bridge already has a span down. Okay, so this guy's holding this is probably a GBU-10. He's holding the target cursors long to try and trick the system so he gets a better dive angle on the bomb. It releases a little late. But now he's going to move the cursor down. Now that he's got the bomb in the air, he's going to move the cursor down to this particular area here where the bridge meets the bank, right? Remember, again, this is a cruddy video compared to what we actually saw in the airplane. All right, so he'll get a fire signal here in a second when he starts to lay the laser on for the last few seconds time of flight. There's his fire, and this is what a bridge looks like when it falls down. Okay, notice that it actually falls into the water. You'll see a big old splash. See a big splashing there. All right, so this is another bridge. This is kind of fun. Sorry, fun from my perspective. This is a suspension bridge, and if you can see right here, this bridge has already been bombed, and there's actually a large portion of this bridge that's out. The guy just hit the corner of it here. So this guy's holding his bomb right on the top suspension piece, right? This is a suspension bridge. This is one of the top pieces of the suspension system. And then when the bomb hits, watch what happens in the background. Okay, bomb, boom. Now watch the rest of the bridge.
The whole thing.
That's fun.
Okay. So this is a hardened aircraft shelter. Anybody remember TAB Vs? Anybody flying in Europe remember TAB Vs? These are hardened shelters where you stick airplanes. So these are taxiways. These are all hardened shelters, concrete reinforced shelters where I put an airplane inside to protect it from, oh, I don't know, things like this. So you can see there's a HAZ here. You can see other maintenance equipment, taxiways around it and stuff. And this is a pretty traditional. They're all over Europe. They look like little Quonsets. They're reinforced concrete HAZ. We get inside this? I think the answer is yes. Okay. You can see the bomb come winging in from the bottom. This is what's called a new generation HAZ. These are newer ones. They're actually nice. We had some questions as to whether or not we could actually get inside them. You can see they've got taxiways in front. I parked my airplane in here. Now remember, black is hot, right? We remember things that are flamey and black are hot. So he's holding his system right here. He's holding his aim point right here on the side, trying to get into the side of this. And you'll notice that I blow out the main doors, and I blow out the side, and I blow out the back. So yeah, we're able to get inside. This is an airfield. This is a test. Okay, these are airplanes in revetments, right? These are little concrete, or I mean cement bunker revetments. Anybody know what kind of airplanes these are? Anybody? Well, we'll get closer. So we'll see. Okay, they're actually sitting out in the open. Okay, I would ask you to see swept wings, right? Nope, not MiGs. Okay, nope. These are swept wings. They've got longer tails. These are big airplanes. Swept wings with pointy tails. Maybe we'll get a hint here. I don't know. Swept wings, swept tail. Maybe they're, I don't know. We'll see. Oh, maybe it's a Tu-16 Badger. Swept tail, big wings, and stuff like this.
Bombers.
Okay, these are the Tu-16 Badgers that they were concerned were loaded up with chemical weapons. Okay, this is what a Badger looks like in the open. Doesn't fare very well.
That's what a Badger looks like broken.
All right, so sometimes you find other things. You're looking for an airfield, and all of a sudden you go, oh my God, look what I found. And here's a MiG-25 just sitting out in the open. And this guy was actually supposed to be hitting a hardened shelter down the bottom. He's like, oh, hey, oh my God, look what I see. So here's a MiG-25 sitting out in the open. Boom. Okay. All right. This is a pretty unique target. It's very distinctive. Anybody know what this is? If you recognize what it is, when we get closer, call it out. I know there are combat veterans in this room that might recognize it. Okay. That's okay. We'll get a little closer.
Officers Club?
No, that's a good guess. All right. So we're getting pretty distinctive. We're starting to actually see the target area right here. But if you don't recognize it, that's okay. Okay. If you don't recognize it, this is what it looked like in Cuba in 1962. This is what it looks like in Kazakhstan today. This is what it looked like in the Nellis Ranges, where I drop practice bombs every week.
Missile launching.
And this is what it looks like in real life. Missile, 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 missile. Distinctive radar in the center of it. You can see the roads that go through. Very distinctive pattern.
Is that the control facility for all the missiles in the perimeter?
That's correct. That's correct. All right. So something real quick here. So this is a bunker. It's a little hard to see, but you'll see it better in a second. There's already been a bomb that's been dropped on the top. These are very hard to get into. So what we did was we dropped the bomb, and then the second guy hit the same hole. Right? Anybody see Zombieland? Anybody fan of Zombieland? What's rule number 2? Double tap. Okay. So it's already been in there once. They've already dug a hole, and let's see what the bomb does on the second. Let's see if the second one gets any kind of effect. So the first one just dug a hole, and the second one, I think it gets some effect. All right. So this is the Baghdad Nuclear Research Facility. Anybody been there? Anybody? Just me? Okay. So we're going to see some interesting things here. I'm going to point out a couple things I'm going to want you to look at. So these are the two buildings where they house the centrifuges, okay? And the things I want to point out to you are, look up here where this, underneath here, you're going to see a long building and a short one. Everybody see that? Kind of long building and a short one right next to it? So keep your eye on those. We're going to see it again, okay? Long building and short one, while this guy comes in on his target. Now here's some interesting things we're going to see. These are cooling ponds, okay? All right, ready? Not his bomb, okay? Still not his bomb, okay? Okay. That one's his bomb, okay? So you see 1, 2, 3 in there. All right, so let's look at another guy's tape, same situation. All right, here again, I see the long building and the short one. They're not quite as bright because this guy's got his gain set differently, but you see it's the same two buildings, okay? Long building, short building, we all recognize that?
The same hole.
It's actually, all right, this is the first bomb that's going off, not his bomb, right? He's still trying to track through, and you can see what the system does. There his bomb goes off. You can see what the system does when the bomb goes off. All right, now this is kind of fun. Here's the same situation. This is how close airplanes get. Right there's a 117. All right, here's another one right down here. Look down here.
Friendly, sorry?
Here's the other 117. Those are the two airplanes that are involved in the same attack. Right there's my long building and my short building. Recognize those? Bomb going off in the bottom. Okay. Long building, short building, we recognize that. You saw the other two airplanes fly right through his field of view. So that's how close you got to other guys when you're on a coordinated single ship attack.
And you're not talking to each other.
No.
So you have different axes of attack? And
Different axes of
different
attack,
altitudes?
different altitudes. And you better be on your time, and you better be on your axis of attack. Okay. All right, so what worked and what didn't? Blackjet worked, okay? So prior to going into this, stealth was kind of an unknown commodity. We had tested at the range, we'd run against structured situations and range tests, but nobody really knew what happened when the shit hit the fan, excuse me, and what happened with real missiles. System-wise, it could not have been a better situation for us. Iraq is desert. It has very low humidity in the air, obviously. IR systems do extremely well in that situation. I could see targets for a long way off. It was optimized for our way of doing it. GBU-27 and the GBU-10s were both great. The weapons worked very well. Intel support, great when we had it. We did not have complete target coverage of all of Iraq, believe it or not. There were times where I distinctly remember a guy named Joe Boulay going out for a target one night, and they go, "We don't have a picture of this piece of Iraq. Here's a picture from here's a picture of the system you're going against. Took it out of 3-1. Said, here's what the system looks like." You're like, "You're kidding me. We've been at war how long? We've been in theater how long? And you don't have a picture of every piece of Iraq?" We didn't always get what we wanted. Nowadays, Google Earth, I can do whatever I want. It's a different world, right? Weather. The first couple days of the war, I flew some of the worst weather I've ever flown through ever. Okay, days 3 and 4 of the war, we lost some sorties. Thunderstorm City, thunderstorms on the tanker. You were in the weather so bad you didn't know if it was AAA shooting at you or whether it was lightning in the weather. Extremely bad. We were going down lower, 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 trying to get outside the weather to try and actually get to the target. It was extremely difficult. I think I'm in that picture. I'm not sure where though. So, pre-mission planning was the key to early success. We had an opportunity to look at targets throughout the entire build-up to Desert Shield, Desert Storm. We were able to look at what the targets were going to look like. We had photo packs. We had a lot of good pre-mission planning. We had some interesting software and manning shortfalls. So we decided going into this thing that we'd be able to use 2 teams of 3 men each on the mission planning cell, because kind of based on what we thought we were going to employ, seemed to be enough guys. Not even close. We ended up with 6 mission planning cell teams instead of 2 from each squadron. It was just unbelievable the amount of workload that was done because we were flying the airplanes far more than we ever expected to. We flew 3 goes a night, about 30 sorties a night, when we in fact expected to maybe fly 10. Very taxing on the system. TOT's mass versus surprise. So traditionally, we all thought, okay, if I have a 5-minute TOT window, everybody's going to ram into the beginning of this window, and we're going to overwhelm the target with mass as we roll through. We're going to completely overwhelm them. What we found was that if 4 of us are going to attack an airfield, and you're going to drop first, and then 30 seconds later I'm going to drop, they're all going to be awake and angry when I get there. Right? So I fly down an airfield that you've already woke them up and peed them off, and suddenly that might not be the best thing in the world. So what we did was actually started stretching things out, where if we're going to attack an airfield and 4 of us are going to do it, maybe we're going to be 20 minutes apart. So after your bomb drops, they're all like, they're 15 minutes later, like, oh, who else is coming? And then the second bomb hits and stuff. So a little bit of a training challenge. Tempo was surge operations for the entire wing. We had 2 squadrons, and up until day 10, when the 4th, 17th shut down training and came over with their additional jets and people, I did something every single night. Every single night, everybody did something. You either flew, or you mission planned, or you were a spare, or you were in the tower. There was no off night. You had to do something every single night. When the 4th, 17th got there, finally you might have a night off. So it was pretty demanding tempo early on, and we got some relief by about day 10. Okay, so there's a couple personal stories. So I kept every letter that my wife sent me while I was over there. I still have them. A lot of them came as this desert fax thing. Anybody familiar with this? Everybody remember? AT&T did a thing where you could walk into any AT&T center, and you could write out a 1-page fax, and they would fax it to a guy in Desert Shield and Desert Storm. So I got a lot of these from my wife. Notice, by the way, that it all starts with like spacing here, and then as you get down to the bottom, all the words that are crammed into the bottom, stuff like that. So letters from my wife I got were usually in a couple forms, like this, or another form I'll show you in a second. Unfortunately, I'm starting to lose these now because these were thermally printed, right? And those of you that have seen receipts from like Home Depot or whatever these days that are thermally printed, you know that after 6 months you just start losing them. Yeah. A lot of these are starting to disappear on me and stuff, but which is unfortunate. But I have all the letters that my wife wrote me while I was over there. My wife was a nurse, is a nurse. She was a nurse working at the University Medical Center in Las Vegas. So a lot of my letters from my wife came like this, on University Medical Center chart notes, stuff like that. So I get a lot of letters from my wife on green chart notes from charts because she was at work, and so. Sometimes I get letters that would say things like this. So I don't know if you can read this or not, but it says, "Are you sure you wouldn't rather be a cashier at 7-Eleven?" It says, "I promise I wouldn't mind. I'd even shop at Payless." So if you know my wife, Payless ain't happening. So this is 1991. Cell phones weren't a player, but my wife, being a nurse, carried a beeper, but it was a beeper that could only display a phone number. Right? Remember those days? Seems like so long ago. Anyway, she had a beeper that was pretty advanced that would display a phone number. She could call a phone number, you could call a number, her beeper number, type in a phone number, and that would display on a beeper, right? Those are the days. So, because she worked all hours, she worked for a trauma surgeon. I never knew where she was going to be. Plus, I was in Saudi. She's in Las Vegas. The time change, I never did get straight. I was flying nights. So the chances of me ever talking to her on the phone were like 0, right? Where is she? Is she working? I had no idea what time it is in Vegas. So what we worked out was that I had her beeper number, and if I was okay, anytime I'd get in her phone, or if I could see a telephone, there weren't a lot of them, but if I'd see a phone, I could dial her beeper number, and I would just enter a phone number that was all 7s. And if she ever got a beep that was all 7s, she knew I was alive, and I was thinking about her, and everything was cool. So I used her beeper number all the time when I was over there. If I ever got near her phone, I could do it. She'd be in surgery, or she'd be doing something. Oh, beeper, he's alive, he's thinking about me. So. But a lot of people were active during Desert Storm. Another personal story. So I grew up in Minnesota. This is an editorial that was in the Minneapolis Star Tribune. Bombs for peace, about as sensible as sacrifices for rain. This is a guy who's an educator at St. Olaf College. And he writes a couple things. It's hard to read some of this, so I'll just tell you. First he says, he gives this condescending description. He says, you know, the word sortie as a lighthearted ring comes from the word to sally forth, and infantry comes from the word, you know, for boys and stuff like that. And he talks about the fact that Inca gods used to sacrifice children for rain, but we become smarter than that. But now we still have bombs for peace, and this is, you know, makes no sense. It was a pretty critical Pretty critical editorial in the Minneapolis paper during the Gulf War. Pretty critical of what we were doing over there. So it spurs people to write letters to the editor. Notice, by the way, that this is the same day. This letter to the editor was written the same day as this appeared. The writer wasted no time putting this out and stuff. And the writer jumped on it in big ways, right? I read with great dismay and sorrow his editorial. Dismay because the editor Stark obviously have low standards or guidelines of his guest editorials. Sorrow because according to the attributes at the end, he's an educator of our children. And then the condescending part. Dismay is from the French word dismay, which means strong disappointment. Sorrow is the right. Writer's really hammering this guy, right? And then hammers him on this part to equate reversing the aggression of a madman who declares he has nuclear weapons and he desires to use them with the murder of innocent boys in an attempt to make brains unconscionable. There's no rational connection between them. Oh, sadly, there's a rational between killing and peace and freedom. Ask the Kuwaitis, ask the Jews who suffer unprovoked Scud missile attacks, ask the Jews who survived concentration camps of World War II, ask those who survived the Revolutionary War. So she's really hammering this guy pretty hard. Yeah. My mother. Prior to Gulf War, not very politically active, but during Gulf War, not only wrote the letter to the editor, but also wrote Minnesota Senator, who was pretty liberal at the time. That's the reference she has up here. It says, "What a jerk. Sad part is this fool is an educator like Wellstone, who was the senator from Minnesota at the time." She took him to task too. So everybody gets involved. Personal
Bravo
story.
for Barbara.
Tell personal stories I thought I'd share. Okay, conclusions. So get off the stage slide. So the aircraft was proven pretty effective in its combat debut. We only made up 2.5% of the sorties. We took 40% of the targets down during the Gulf War. Okay, no aircraft were damaged or destroyed. The Gulf War Air Power Survey conducted afterwards for the Air Force said any target in Iraq was open to destruction by 2017. Pretty effective in its combat debut. Of course, no plane survives initial contact with the enemy. That's von Moltke the Elder that said that. Pre-war mission was planning was essential but needed to adapt. When we went into the Gulf War, we went in with an airplane that some combat missions took 18 hours to plan. Right? That's the age of our software and the computers that ran that software. 18 hours to plan a combat mission. Now, if you were going to use these in a limited role, 18 hours might be a lot of time. But in a rapid-paced combat environment, the software we had, the techniques we had, the mission planning system we had, couldn't keep up. Right? Just changed exactly what we expected. Doctrinal target set, right, went out the window. Did I ever practice against a bridge in peacetime? No. Did I ever practice against a lot of things I dropped against in the Gulf War? No. We dropped against non-doctrinal targets. Did I ever drop against an aircraft shelter in peacetime? No. If you remember, Hussein went into the oil fields and he dug large trenches and he filled them with oil that he was going to ignite when the war started. We dropped bombs on the oil manifolds that were bumping the oil into those things, precision targets. Did I ever drop anything like that? No. So the target set went out the window and they tasked us against whatever was at hand. As a matter of fact, we were never designed to be short-term tasking, right? We were never designed because I need a photo pack, I need coordinates, I need all this stuff. So I'm going to go north, and I've got some target north of Baghdad, I don't remember what it was. Crew chief takes the ladder off the airplane. I'm doing my stuff. Ladder comes back up in the airplane, somebody comes back up the airplane. Crew chief, forgot something. I turn to look, it's not the crew chief, it's the wing commander. Alton C. Whitley. And he has in his hands a new photo pack. And he says, we have, and they are like as fresh off the press as you can get, right? Photos. He goes, new target set. The Iraqis are pulling highly enriched uranium out of one of their bombed reactors. You got to go get it right now. Wow. I'm like, cool. I'm going to go do this. And I start typing the coordinates, and I think to myself, I'm 2.5 hours from Baghdad, right? I'm in New Orleans. Baghdad's way up on the Upper Peninsula. I know they didn't just take this photo with an overhead. Something had to, so the time to get this photo to me was, and the time for me to get up there, everybody's really excited, but realistically I'm thinking by the time I get there, these guys could be done and gone home, right? Turn the truck back into rider, it'll be all finished with what they're doing. But that didn't stop somebody from running up my ladder and handing me a target set for Baghdad Nuclear Research Facility, and I went and dropped, and I didn't see any trucks, but blew the bejesus out of what was there. So the doctrinal targets that were out the window, they use the airplane differently than expected, and weather presents significant challenges. I'm here to tell you, I've flown worse weather there than I've ever flown in before, both on a tanker and bombing, or since, before or since. I don't want to fly in weather like that again. Realistic training is one of the keys to success. I might as well have been flying in the Southwest Theater. I was flying in the deserts of Nevada, the deserts of Utah, the deserts of California, and then I went to war in the desert of Saudi Arabia and Iraq. Lucky me. Lucky that that war wasn't in the jungles of Nicaragua or someplace else like that, right? So I got to train in an area that we were going to go fight in. Intensive in-theater training, got to work out the kinks. I got to fly lots of sorties in theater. I got to figure out the airspace system. I got to figure out the airfield. I got to spend a lot of time and work out all those kinks. And then experience and training. Remember I said that I had about 1,600 hours of fire time, about 400 hours in the aircraft at the start of the war. I was an average guy, right? Average guy in the 117 at the time had a couple of fire tours before him. He was an instructor. Average guy had about 1,500 hours of fire time. Table stakes, right? So we were an extremely experienced group of guys. So when things went wrong or you had to adapt, Harvey, the 100-hour wingman, wasn't there, right? The guy who just checked out in the airplane and had no idea what was going on wasn't there. So, and then here's Chuck Horner, his comment. A lot of new things we could only dream of in past conflict enable us to gain surprise in each and every day of the war. Kind of a fitting epitaph for the airplane as far as the Gulf War. So that's what I got. Questions?
Why isn't the F-117 still operational?
Cost, probably more than two things, I think. One is cost. Anytime you have a small specialized fleet of airplanes, the cost just skyrockets. SR-71s, EF-111s, F-4Gs, 117s. So anytime you have a small fleet of airplanes that are not unique in terms of supply chain, training, and anything else, the cost to maintain them just skyrockets. There are other newer and better stealth technologies on the street today. You notice that the airplanes are all black and faceted, right? No curves on the airplane because computer technology at the time didn't allow us to do that. Stealthy airplanes now, like the F-35 and the F-22, nice and round and actually airplane looking. So technology's older. Technology was expensive to maintain.
Is there anything that 117 can do that the F-22 can't do?
Yeah, the precision weapons that we dropped in the 117 you can't drop out of the F-22. The F-35 might be able to, but the F-22 can't.
Because they're too large, or?
Because the weapons are too large, and the F-22 has a limited ground attack capability. F-35 will probably carry those same 2,000-pound class bombs and be able to do those things, but the F-22 can't. The F-22 carries other weapons that may be able to do other things.
How many 117s were produced?
59. 59 total.
How many were lost? Only one was lost in combat, Scott, and how many peacetime?
So let's see. So there's one airplane lost in combat. That guy lives, by the way, in Francistown. There was one F-117 lost in combat. It was during the Serbian campaign. When I got to the airplane, we'd lost, at that point in time, we'd lost two in normal training, one in 86, one in 87. There was 2 or 3 more losses. There was an air show loss. There was a training loss on the range at Holloman. I think they probably lost, let's go crazy and say 6, maybe 6, 7.